accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Hey, fellow Owens, the Dark Crisis is upon us, and we're going to be covering Dark Crisis in episode number 214 of the podcast of OA. I'm your co-host, Myron Rumsey, and I'm joined by my co-host and good friend, Phil Bova. Phil, my friend, how's life treating you?
Great, buddy. Hello, fellow Owens. Good to be back. I see you're sporting your NASA shirt, man, for the big Artemis scrubbed launch today.
Yeah. I was like all excited about it, and then it got scrubbed. Oh, wow.
And I had all my screens up, man. I was like, man, this is gonna look cool on all my screens. And then it said, oh, it's scrubbed. I was like, oh man.
Well, yeah. It has been a while. It has been over a month since we recorded, and that's a lot of that falls on me. I apologize. We've had some things happen at work with we've had a couple of unfortunate deaths of employee families, and then I took a week off, and during my week off, which I tried to relax, let's see, I burnt my hand on the first day. I fell off a ladder on the second day. It's like, man, I need a vacation from my vacation. So I tried. I was hoping to get together that week, and then it was just, I was in so much pain. So this episode's been a long time coming, so I apologize. I don't like to go this long without providing some content. But here we are anyway. I'm going to blame it on the Dark Crisis. That's what it was.
It is. That's a good blaming point. And besides that, life gets in the way, man. Everybody knows how this works, and can't stop that ball from rolling. And plus, you and I aren't getting any younger, my love.
Oh, next month I will be 58.
I'll be 50 in January. No, I'm sorry. I'll be 49 in January. Whew.
Wow. Tell you, when you hit 50, the check engine light starts coming on, man.
Oh, that engine light came on when I hit 40. My hockey days caught up with me, man. That's my biggest complaint. All my years of playing ice hockey and roller hockey and everything, yeah, it's caught up.
So, there's no Green Lantern book coming out right now, but there was a Green Lantern book that did come out recently, so we're going to talk about that. That's the Dark Crisis, World Without a Green Lantern, or World Without a Justice League Green Lantern, whatever it is. We're going to talk about that, but we're also ankle deep, we're more like knee deep in Dark Crisis of Infinite Earths, as it's been retitled. So we thought we'd talk about that this episode, and we've got a little bit of Green Lantern news, not a lot of stuff. But if you head out to your local Walmart, you might find a John Stewart Superpowers figure from McFarlane Toys. It's a revisit to the Superpowers collection from the 1980s, I want to say. That was actually that figure was the first Green Lantern figure ever made.
They should also do a reproduction of the Wonder Twins. Just saying.
That would be nice. Nice.
And I would definitely buy it.
I understand there's more coming. I understand there is a Hal coming. People were like, well, why, this is a revisit. Why are you doing that? But, they redid Dark Side. They're not reproducing the line of those line of figures figure by figure. But, I'm sure there's going to be more if this wave is successful. And I'm assuming it is, because I'm seeing people saying that they're not finding them because they're sold out at their Walmarts. So that's really cool. And on the action figure front, Mego is finally releasing an 8-inch version of Hal. They did release one several years ago, but it was out of scale to the rest of it. It was much, much larger. And, it's funny, as a kid of the 70s, the Mego figures were like the prime real estate of superhero toys. And there were a lot of characters who never made it to production, Green Lantern being one of them. And I remember as a kid, I used to customize my Megos before it was a thing, And I made a Hawkman by taking corrugated cardboard and cutting out wings and running bread twist ties through the wings and then strapping it around the chest of a figure to make Hawkman.
All the things we did as kids, man.
I took the boots. I wanted to make a tarantula, Spider-Man's villain tarantula. I took the boots and I cut a long V in the bottom of the boot and folded the tip out to make the pointy tips for the scorpion. Not scorpion, tarantula. And I had made a Green Lantern figure using other characters' outfits and cutting them up and resewing them together. It was brown and green instead of black and green, but you got to do what you got to do.
I guess my only full disclosure from childhood is pretending that Hawkman from the Flash Gordon movie toy series was actually Carter Hall
Oh,
Hawkman and flying him around. That was what I had. That's what I had.
I took an extra Superman figure and cut the chest off, so I had just the belt down, and then took the wings I made out of cardboard and strapped them on. And I took a helmet from a Romulan from the Star Trek line and put that on to be his helmet and made Hawkman out of it. I think I gave him
Man,
the Falcon boots too, but
I wish we had a picture of that.
I believe I have it somewhere down in my basement. One thing my mom did not do was throw out my Migos.
Okay, well, I'm gonna tell you one thing right now. That if that photo ever pops up in my text thread one day, I swear to God, I'm gonna laugh my what off.
I used to take scissors and drill extra holes in the side of the torsos and then hook up an extra set of arms to make the four-armed Spider-Man.
I used to use live action fireworks with my GI Joe toys.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean it was because I only ruined a few of them because I used to have the whole collection. The only thing I didn't have was the flag, which was the big aircraft carrier, and I didn't have the Joe headquarters. I had the dome. But yeah, I blew up a few. It was a good time back then.
My GI
Back
Joes
when
were
we didn't care about blowing our face off.
My GI Joes were the big tall ones.
Yeah, those were cool too. Those were my brother had a couple of those, and I inherited them. He used to collect the Bionic Man too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was a cool figure.
And the only other thing going on is that there will be a Green Lantern book in November. Jeffrey Thorne is getting a one-shot on Green Lantern on John Stewart, and it looks like it's supposed to fill the gap between the end of his 12-issue run and Dark Crisis to kind of explain some continuity things. And as we start talking about Dark Crisis, there are some changes to continuity if Dark Crisis is paying respect to what's supposedly happening with regards to characters who died and some characters who might have changed costumes and changed cores. We see some differences in that in Dark Crisis. Is that an editorial mistake? Is that undoing some things that Thorne did? I don't know. But there is going to be a John Stewart one-shot from Jeff Thorne that ties those two things together and fills in what happened with John. So you almost have to assume that Thorne is done with what his story was going to be, and he's given a one-shot to wrap it up, because who knows what's going to happen once we get to January and Dark Crisis is over with.
Well, what's his face? Johns is going to be on that JSA, so Alan Scott's going to be in the works coming soon.
Yep. So who knows?
That said, that might be your Green Lantern pivot.
Maybe
Coming out of Crisis,
It's everything is so up in the air. We really don't know what's going to happen. But lots to talk about. We'll be back in a few minutes to start talking about Dark Crisis and World Without a Green Lantern right after we do a Know Your Core segment. So we'll be back in just a few.
Listen up, Lanterns. It's time you took the oath with Green Lantern John Stewart. In brightest day, in blackest night, don't let the podcast of Oa escape your sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern's light.
Fellow Owens, welcome back to another Know Your Core segment. This week, in episode 214, we have a character by the name of Ashel Sabian Formanta, or better known as Ash, Green Lantern of Sector 650. The creators were Ron Mars and Tony Harris. First appearance, Green Lantern Corps Quarterly, number 7, January 1994. Appearance of Death, Green Lantern Volume 4, number 42, August 2009. Once a simple farmer, Ash lived on a world terrorized by vampires in Sector 650. Sometime after his wife Tasha was killed by one of them, he was inducted into the Green Lantern Corps and began a crusade against vampires in his sector. After avenging his wife by killing the one who murdered her, Ash learned that the monsters in his sector were disciples of cosmic vampire Starbreaker, who he has dedicated himself to destroying. And there you go, fellow Owens, Ash of Sector 650.
Well, my friends, we are back and we are talking about Dark Crisis. We're recording this at the end of August, and we're about halfway through the saga of Dark Crisis, now Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths, as it's been rebranded. But yeah, we're about 4 months into this 8-month-long event. And prior to the whole event starting, there was a free comic book day book, special edition, and there was the Road to Dark Crisis, and then the ball kept rolling. I don't know about you, Phil, but I've only really been reading the main series. Have you read any of the ancillary books tied into this? Yeah, me either.
No, I'm just doing the main ones. You know, it's more that way. I mean, the only side, whenever, I don't know, it's hard to, like, if there was a big Green Lantern event, like Blackest Night, and they did all those side issues that tied in, you know, I'd be willing to delve out into those territories. But I mean, like any crisis, I'm into the crisis alone, and I'm not so much curious about how many people it impacts.
Yeah.
I mean, basically just the Green Lanterns, really, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I like reading events that take place in the entire DC universe, but I don't feel the need, unlike during Blackest Night, where I think I picked up everything during Blackest Night. I didn't do that here because I felt like the main series was giving me enough. But if there's something out there that, you know, goes more into it, maybe I will. I'm not exactly sure. I know there's one issue coming out that's going to have Hal and Barry in it. That looks like it's I think it's issue 786, which comes out in September. It's not listed in the checklist for Dark Crisis, but I can't imagine it doesn't have something to do with it.
Isn't part of Dark Crisis having to do to track down Barry Allen?
yeah, it's interesting because they list issue 783, 784, and 785 as tie-ins, but they don't list anything beyond that. But 786 has Pariah and Hal and Barry on the cover, so I don't know whether this is evolving and changing as time goes on. That could very well be, but so far the story's been interesting. This is a little different in that it looks like Pariah, who was around during the original Crisis on Infinite Earths, is back, and he's trying to restore the multiverse by destroying the current multiverse. That's the way I'm interpreting it. I'm assuming you're getting the same thing I'm getting out of it.
Yeah, I am. That's kind of how I figured.
So there's been a lot of Green Lantern stuff in it, but just in the very beginnings, we know, like as you mentioned, that Barry's missing, and so Wally and I believe Wallace go off searching for Barry to find out what happened to him, and we are all under the assumption that the Justice League died because that was the whole big media event that the Justice League is dead, and Black Adam is telling everybody that they're dead, and Hal finds out about it 2 different ways. It's interesting because they kind of break their own continuity. In the Road to Dark Crisis, there's a mini story in there where Hal meets up with one of the Aqua people. I can't remember which one it is. It's not Kaldor. Jackson. It's Jackson. And they have a bit of an adventure. These aliens come down and go into the water, and Hal's there. And Hal's on patrol, and he's trying to stop these aliens. And he finds out the Justice League is dead. But then in Dark Crisis proper, he finds out again. And his reaction is completely differently, and he finds out in a different way completely. So even the continuity of the event's a little wonky here. Obviously, the writer of Dark Crisis, Josh Williamson, didn't talk to the person who did the story in the Road to Dark Crisis because it is different.
Well, it's also worth mentioning that at the time with Road to Dark Crisis, where that was written, that's your catch point, right? To get your people a free comic book day. Let's get some new readers. Blah blah blah. So then you rebrand it, Dark Crisis. It starts. Then you like you said, it's a different tell. But then also, let's not forget, you rebrand it further by saying, well, it's not Dark Crisis. We're going to call it something else because we're DC. And, it makes more sense because we should have done that to begin with.
Well, we need to reprint this book with different covers, Yeah.
Right.
But what's interesting is that Hal comes to Earth and he doesn't know that John is gone or dead or whatever, which the first thing that brings to mind is, well, why doesn't the Green Lantern Corps know that John is missing or gone? Because he was kind of a big shot, and you would think that would happen, unless in this Thorn story we're going to find out that John is no longer a regular Green Lantern. Perhaps.
Well, he's not. Isn't he the Emerald whatever? What's it called?
The Emerald Knight or whatever, yeah. But, you assume, because this takes place after whatever happens in the Dark Sector, that all ends, and he comes back, and he's in the Justice League, and he's got his new outfit, a version of his new outfit. But they don't call him, I don't think they call him Green Lantern at all. They call him John Stewart. So I don't know whether he's actually part of the Green Lantern Corps or not, but that was the first kind of a piece of a missing puzzle for me, was that somebody should have known he was missing, whether it be Hal or Joe Mullane or the Green Lantern Corps in general. Somebody should know. And in the beginning, we don't know what's going on with Pariah. We just know he's trying to destroy the multiverse. But we find out as this story unfolds that he's trying to rebuild it. Like, he knows about the original multiverse, and he's trying to get that multiverse back. That's the way I'm interpreting it, is he wants the old multiverse back. But what's interesting is that there's a scene where we see the Justice League, the Green Lantern Corps, and Guy is there. Simon is a Green Lantern again, not that odd character that Thorne had him being. Jessica's not a Sinestro Corps member. She's a Green Lantern. And to me, it's just interesting that all those things seem to be undone. And we see Aricia at some point. We see Ismat Cole. We see Badge, who's back to being a green instead of a blue. So I don't know whether this is just, oops, I'm not paying attention to what's going on in the Green Lantern book, and I'm just using these characters. Or is some of the stuff going to get undone? I'm not sure. Because Thorne kept saying, no, that dead is dead as far as I'm concerned. So who knows?
Yeah, well, I think that was just smoke.
Yeah.
We all know in the comic book world, dead is not dead. I mean,
right.
I don't care what writer you are. Dead is not dead. I'm sorry. Any writer has the license to bring back any character they want later on, if they're approved.
Yeah,
so.
I don't see those changes sticking no matter what. But one of the interesting things is what this does is, by the Justice League being off the table, other characters start to rise up. So we've kind of got this new version of the Justice League with Jonathan Kent and so on. And so they're trying to position those characters. And it looks like this is some of the remnants of 5G. That's the way at least I'm looking at it. But he's trying to assemble a new Justice League. And Dick Grayson doesn't really want to be a part of it. He's kind of running the Titans Academy. Deathstroke shows up, and Deathstroke kind of tries to be a mentor to the Titans. And that goes really wrong really quickly. He actually is assembling his own army of villains, his own secret society. And Black Adam is training the Justice League, not Deathstroke. Black Adam is training the Justice Leagues, and they are not willing to accept his, sometimes you got to kill thing. They're not willing to accept that. But what was interesting for me in all those scenes were how Damian played off of all of that, because Damian is willing to go that distance.
Mm-hmm. He'd be the only one, though.
Yeah. But I thought it was interesting because it calls forward that whole thing. Why do heroes feel the need to kill? And you can kind of see both sides. And so to me, it was an interesting piece of dialogue to see Damian's point of view kind of be reinforced by Black Adam a little bit. But ultimately, they don't go that way, and they kind of part ways with him. There's an awesome fight scene in one of the issues where Nightwing takes on Deathstroke. That was really good.
Yeah.
One thing I didn't like was we saw Cyborg Superman show up at one point, and he was absolutely wasted in that book.
Yeah, that was kind of sad. It was like a one-off, one page. That kind of lost him for Crisis for me. That was kind of like my existential crisis when he died. So
again.
Again. Dead is dead, man. Come on.
But it just, he was beaten way too easily in this series.
I'd agree.
With John Kent and Cyborg showing up. But we do find out that Deathstroke is being manipulated by Pariah. That's interesting. And then we see Kyle Rayner rescued by Hal and Joe, and the Green Lantern Corps show up. And I thought, boy, this is odd that it's taken this long for them to find poor Kyle Rayner. But
and it's funny because if you get on Twitter, there's there's a couple Kyle Rayner guys I think are on my feed all the time, and this poor chap, he's always talking about how sad he is because I mean, Kyle Rayner isn't doing anything lately. He just appears here and there at a whim. And then in different outfits all the time because Kyle Rayner wears different costumes all the time, I guess.
Yeah, there's no consistency there.
No.
But I just thought it was odd, and we find out the guy was looking for Kyle, but they show up and and give Kyle a ring, and Kyle's back into the fold, which is good. And then when the whole thing with Black Adam goes south, who shows up but the JSA, which to me that was one of the best full page spreads I've seen in a long time. I loved that image of them coming back.
It's been a long time coming that they should have been in them. I mean, I don't know. I've always liked that team up more than I've actually liked the Justice League, to be quite honest with you. And if we're going to be fair here, I mean, Dark Crisis isn't even a Justice League book anyway, and neither was Crisis on Infinite Earths. They weren't even in there that much at the very beginning.
Right.
So, I mean, the focus on this shouldn't be just on the Justice League itself being gone, which I think that's the purpose of what Dark Crisis is supposed to be for all these other heroes to overshadow all the original ones. But at the same time, you're also sacrificing a lot. And when you say your Justice League is dead, and when everybody knows they're not, they're in whatever dark realm or whatever hidden mists that exists out there in the whatever sphere of the DC universe, they're going to be back sooner or later.
I mean, what we find out is that Pariah supposedly disintegrated them, and each one of them is in a world of their own making that is built upon their fondest, most innermost desires.
Yeah.
And he's using that as energy to build up towards his end game. But the JSA shows up in issue 3, which is the most recent issue of Dark Crisis. And there's a lot of Green Lantern stuff going on in that issue. The Green Lantern Corps goes to Riot in Sector 666 and sees the Black Lantern battery charged up again. Because Necron is part of this event. He's part of Pariah's Dark Army. And they get there, and Hal, of course, is going to go into the Black Battery all by himself. And Joe and Kyle are like, excuse us? So the three of them go in and leave the rest of the Green Lantern Corps watching to see what's going to happen. And when they get inside the battery, they see Pariah. There's a neat piece of dialogue between Pariah and Hal about Hal's time as Parallax, which was kind of neat. And there's a neat scene where Hal creates a construct of the Justice League to go after Pariah. And I thought there's the most comical thing in this panel. He creates the Justice League, and the Flash is in the middle of the pack, but of course Batman is in the front of the pack, which I thought was kind of hysterical that Batman would be first. But
as always,
right? And as they're fighting, basically Hal decides to have Joe and Kyle put pressure on Pariah, and Hal dives headlong into John Stewart's sphere that his essence is in, and Hal disintegrates, and the issue ends. Well, the section of the Green Lanterns ends, and he's in this other realm with the version of Kyle Rayner and, interestingly enough, Jason Todd as a Green Lantern are there, and he encounters them, and they don't know who Hal is. And then we get to see more about Black Adam, and Black Adam is kind of disgruntled by the fact that the Justice League won't follow his lead, so he goes off to find his own Legion of Doom. And that's where, that's where this ends up. And it's interesting, in the Legion of Doom, Sinestro's in the background.
Yes, is that Vandal Savage on the right of Luthor, right?
Yes, yep. And Grodd is there, and Cheetah, Captain Cold, Black Manta. I think Heatwave is there.
Yeah, it's Boomerang in the back. Is that... Okay, yeah.
Yeah, a whole bunch of bad guys.
Sinestro looks pretty cool right there.
Yeah. And that's where the third issue leaves off, and that brings us to the World Without a Green Lantern. And this issue is interesting in that it's a one-shot, and it's not just John Stewart and a Green Lantern book, but there's also a story with Hawkgirl in it. True confession, I did not read the Hawkgirl story. But
true confession, I'll say they really they did a good job with her version of the story.
Good.
It's because they kind of it's kind of like an idea for the character that kind of basically turned her into a Indiana Jones type character. It was really neat.
Cool. So when we get to we dive into this issue, you'll have to do the heavy lifting on that side because I did not. I didn't even read that part, to be honest.
Okay.
But what's interesting to me is this is supposed to be a world created from John Stewart's innermost wishes. So this is John's truest self and what he desires. And we kind of see in the opening part of this, we see Jason Todd as a Green Lantern. We see Kyle. I'm not sure who the third character is, but it basically being narrated by a character who turns out to be the Power Ring turned into a living being, John's long dead sister. And the story is partially narrated by his mother, talking about his time as a soldier. It's interesting to me, one, that Kyle is blind, and that for all the big things that were done during the Robert Venditti run and how much the relationship between John and Kyle and Hal and Guy and the Four Corpsmen, the four legs on a table routine and so on, that Guy is not even a part of this story, nor is Hal. Neither one of them show up. I thought it was just odd. And there was a lot of, they're doing things that only John can do kind of thing. And John, to me, is not that kind of character that needs that kind of an ego boost. So I thought it was just odd that there was this pumping up of his ego by trying to prop him up, because that's not really John's thing. And I honestly would have thought that in John's innermost wishes and his innermost desires, those plans would include Kat Matui.
Well, yeah, that's true, because they've always had such a close friendship.
Well, they were married.
Oh, yeah, that's also true. Right. But in what continuity, though? You know what I mean?
Right. Well, I mean, he was married to her and widowed during Blackest Night. That was still a part of continuity. But is it now? Yeah, that's a fair point. I hate to see that written out and not exist at all. But I found it odd that if this is from John's innermost dreams and this is his perfect universe kind of thing, this isn't what I would have pictured. But that's my interpretation. Obviously, it's not the writers.
No, I get it. I totally understand. I'll be really honest. I don't like the artwork in this.
I didn't, and I was just kind of like, what's the point of the story? Because nothing really happened in it. Like you didn't see this tie back to Dark Crisis and have Hal show up like he does in Dark Crisis #3. So there's nothing that pulls that together. It's just a story of his world and him being kind of pseudo-retired while the Green Lantern Corps is out there, and he only shows up when there's something they can't deal with. And so he shows up to fight this big bad, and that was it.
Yeah, you're right. Well, and like I said, the second story, the Hawkgirl story, was a lot better than the first one. And I actually bought this copy because it had Kirkham did the artwork on there.
Oh yeah.
Always do Kirkham on his artwork. I got to buy his books. But no, I didn't dig the story at all. I don't know what it had to do with anything. It just kind of felt like an alone John Stewart story where he's dealing with some inner emotions with his family.
Yeah, it didn't resonate with me at all, and I was hoping that it resonated with you, because it didn't really do anything for me. And then I was like, I'm not a huge John Stewart fan, but I've read everything he's been in. This is just not what I would have pictured him to have conjured for himself, or for Pariah to have plucked out of his subconscious.
If they would have explored the conversations between his mother and is that his niece, his daughter, his niece?
It's her daughter.
Her daughter.
It's his sister. His sister.
That would have been fine with me. The other stuff, the other sequences, I didn't care for.
Yeah.
The dialogue between them guys was actually kind of cute. Or remiss because of what he's going through right now in Dark Crisis.
Right. And
It's a human element on it.
the writer Philip Kennedy Johnson did have conversations with Jeff Thorne about John Stewart, so I don't know how much that influenced it. I just didn't. I don't know. I was expecting a story. To me, I didn't feel like there was a story here, but it was just there for me. But what about the Hawkgirl book part of it? Because I did not read that part.
The Hawkgirl book was cool. It really. If I'm assuming correctly, this is supposed to take place in their inner, whatever, their pocket dimensions, I guess you're talking about?
Yeah, basically Pariah took their essences and put them in their own little, they look like little energy spheres, but it's their own pocket dimension, essentially. And it's a world that is made up of their innermost desires and dreams. Like, this is their perfect worlds.
Gotcha. So, Kendra Saunders is introduced to this, she's approaching this temple. It's called the Temple of Life. And it's really kind of cool because the whole sequence it like sets up just like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Even down to like there's this little cup on a pedestal in the middle of the room, kind of like the monkey head was. But make a long story short, there's some whip play in there, which bring in some of that Indiana Jones kind of essence to it. But it's just a short story about her search through this temple to find some of her inner self. It was really good. I mean, it's just, her character has never been identified like that. That's kind of like Carter Hall has always been identified as the archaeologist or whatnot. So it's kind of nice seeing her take up that helm. She's trying to find this base of mortality or something like that. And, I don't know. She drinks from it, and then she gets untethered or something like that from like her past lives and potential futures. So everything spins out of control. So, but it's a good story.
I like her outfit. It reminds me a lot of ISIS. I get an ISIS vibe out of it.
It's cool, man. The artwork in this is great. Whoever did the art, let me see. Jack Herbert. Jeremy Adams did the writing.
Well, Jeremy Adams is a good writer. I like Jeremy Adams. I'll have to go back and reread that.
He knows his stuff because when I went through the Venditti run, I did all 4 volumes of Venditti's Hawkman, which was probably the top 5 of my greatest reads. I mean, he just did a phenomenal job with that character. I'd like to read more of Hawkgirl myself. I mean, to be quite honest with you, I'd like the relationship between Hawkgirl and John Stewart. I thought that was a really, really cool relationship that they had in this television series.
It was. I don't want to see it carry through in the comics because for me it's like you're messing around with Hawkman's wife, but I know I'm a purist in that regard. But that's just me.
No, makes sense. I get it.
So what is your overall feeling about this story? Is this going to be worthy of a crisis? For me, it feels like it's a more personal story. Like I don't feel like in the original Crisis on Infinite Earths, it was this huge multiverse spanning story with the red skies, and you see all this stuff and pulling all these different things together. And here, it seems to be very focused just on Earth Zero.
Well, I mean, if I'm going to juxtapose it next to events, I mean, number one, I think it really lacks its pomp and if you were to compare it to Crisis on Infinite Earths. But like, if I'm going to juxtapose it next to other Crises that I've read and I've enjoyed more, I mean, I don't even need to mention Blackest Night because, I mean, that's been the best one ever, to me anyway. 52 was really good. I liked the whole 52 event. It took place, throughout the whole entire year, and I thought that was a really cool event. I liked Identity Crisis. I thought that was kind of cool. I think that opened up a little bit a different paradigm in looking at superheroes and their identities. I think kind of opened up Pandora's box on whether you should have an identity or not, and look where we are now.
Yeah, Identity Crisis was a series that got a lot of heat over some of the controversial things that were in it.
Yeah, I know, but I don't.
I still enjoyed it.
I still enjoy. I mean, I don't buy into the controversy. I understand why there's controversy. I really do. But at the end of the day, I'm gonna say it like this. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going around with all these books that are being banned and everything like that, and it harkens back to this whole McCarthy kind of era where we got to watch what we read. And why I'm gonna let my son read everything. If a book's banned, I'm gonna find it and I'm gonna let my son read it. I mean, people need to draw their own conclusions, at the end of the day. And censorship is one thing, but I don't know. Controversies are controversies, and comic book world has them just as much as anything does. And
I liked Identity Crisis in the dialogue and the conversations it stimulated to have happen outside of the controversies, which to me, I understand why. If I were a big fan of Elongated Man, I might have issues that way too. But in the end, in the long run, it really didn't have that kind of an impact. But the story itself, I liked. But yeah, I'm enjoying the story, but I don't get the same feeling of scope that I got out of other crisis events.
No,
if you
no,
will.
not at all. Even Godhead was had a lot more pomp than this, and that was more of in a contained world, because that was just a lantern verse, if you want to call it that.
Right. So there's more coming, obviously, and we'll see what unfolds in the months to come, and we'll revisit this after this event is over and the dust is settled to talk a little bit about it. But it's a good conversation. I enjoyed kind of rereading these and reading them back to back. I got a better reading experience than I did reading it at the time these were published. Reading them together in one sitting, it was better for me as a reading experience.
People liking this event? Have you heard anything? Or what's Chad and all them think over at the cast?
I know they just recorded an episode about it. I haven't listened to it yet because I knew we were going to record, and I always am cautious to not listen to somebody else's dialogue because I don't want to inadvertently mimic something. Yeah. But in talking to people and looking at some things online and message boards and so on, it's kind of hot and cold. Some people are liking it, but most people are feeling a little underwhelmed. So...
Well, like I told you off mic, my focus is in the realm. I'm getting into the whole House of the Dragons and reading some books, and yeah. So that's where my heart's settled at right now, at least until Hal Jordan returns to his prime.
Yeah, I have not read a lot of comics. I just have not had the interest. I've been reviewing and rereading some old stuff. There just hasn't been anything on the stands, and I know that is partially because, and mainly because, there isn't a Green Lantern I'm going to talk about, and there isn't, even though Hal's showing up in books here and there. There's the whole DC mech thing and some other stuff, but it just isn't the same as having an ongoing Green Lantern book with Hal and the Green Lantern Corps. But maybe we'll get to that point.
I've dropped off. Flashpoint Beyond was one that I started, but I don't think I'm going to continue it. It's Batman. That's all it talks. It's just Batman. It should just be called Batman Beyond.
I started reading it and enjoying it in the beginning, but then I'm like, I could do without it.
Same way. I am going to start reading Deceased War of the Undead Gods, but I haven't started it yet. That one I'm interested in.
I think I've got the first issue of that, but I haven't read it yet. I've got a pile of books I haven't read. So
I just don't think Tom Taylor, he can do no wrong. The dude's a master.
All right, my friend. Well, my power rating is blinking, so we've got some listener feedback. So why don't we take a quick pause and come back and see what our listeners have to say.
This is Salak, Green Lantern of Sector 1418, and you are receiving the podcast of Oa.
The podcast of Oa.
Our first message is from Corey. Corey has some comments on the recent animated movie, Green Lantern, Beware My Power. Transmitting in 3, 2, 1.
Hey guys. I wasn't able to watch Beware My Power until 2 weeks after it came out, but I avoided all reviews and spoilers until I was able to watch it. When I got to the big reveal, my first thought was, Phil and Myron are going to hate this movie. For what's it worth, I didn't really like it either. I almost asked my family, who aren't very knowledgeable about Green Lantern, if they wanted to watch this one with me, and I'm glad I didn't. If this movie is someone's introduction to GL lore, it would be a terrible way to establish the mythology with them. First, there was a point during the movie when I actually felt bored. The pace was not great. So, why would someone not invested in the franchise come back to this slow-moving movie? Second, the writers obviously didn't need to do what they did with Hal. Why would anyone introduced to GL with this movie want to learn more about the history of its most prominent ringbearer as evil? Creating any movie and getting it released is a huge undertaking, so I don't want to just rip it apart. But, the story choices are a huge misstep in expanding the Green Lantern universe and getting new fans. Instead, they managed to create a dull movie that doesn't represent a large portion of Green Lantern history. As always, thank you, Phil and Myron, for all you do, and keep up the good work.
Hey there, Corey. Well, I'll say this about Green Lantern, Beware My Power. It was terrible. Hated it. Didn't like it. It was a hodgepodge mess of sad writing and it was just poor. I mean, they could have done so much better, and it had so much potential. And to put this out there to the fans was, I think, one of the biggest slaps in the face you could ever have. It just, if you're gonna do something, do it right. Don't take bits and pieces from other things and just smack it all together and just shove it on a plate in front of the fans. I'm sorry, that's kind of how I felt this was. The story could have been told better. Don't get me wrong, the animation was cool. I like John Stewart in it, but everything that happened in it was just wrong.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna go through and rehash. We did that in the last episode, but everything you and Corey are both saying, I agree with 100%. I've actually heard people say, well, this is a good way to intro people to the Green Lantern lore, and I'm like, oh no, it's not. And if you want to introduce them to Green Lantern lore, show them First Flight, or show them Emerald Knights, or show them Green Lantern the Animated Series. All three of them are 10 times better than this steaming pile is. I wouldn't. It's not just a huge misstep, as Corey says. It's a giant misstep as far as I'm concerned. And for those people that are like, well, they just want to focus on John Stewart, yada yada yada, doesn't mean anything, it's in an alternate universe, whatever. The thing is you're building a new animated continuity, supposedly, in the Tomorrowverse, and you've just gotten rid of two of your biggest characters for the Green Lantern franchise, and you got rid of the core right out of the gate. It sets a bad precedent, and one only has to look at the Justice League cartoon to see the impact it has on non-comic book readers. Remember when the Green Lantern 2011 movie first came out and it started announcing casting and so on? There was a whole contingent of people who had no idea who Hal was because John was in the Justice League cartoon, and that was the only inroad they had to the DC universe, and they hadn't bothered to read anything. So to say that this doesn't have any bad impact is completely wrong. And for those people out there that are saying that, shame on you, because it does have impact. We've already seen what kind of impact these kind of things have. So,
well, and not only that, I'll add to it before we tell Corey, thank you for rehashing the heartburn we got from this movie. If you're going to tell for the John Stewart fans, if you're going to tell a John Stewart story, I will argue with every single one of those fans. If they write in and tell me that this was a legit John Stewart origin story, forget about it. Totally wrong, totally off the mark. If you're going to do a John Stewart origin Green Lantern animated movie, then do it right and do it his origin story, and don't make it anybody else's.
Right,
and that's the end of the day.
I think Chad made a good point over on the Lantern Cast and their review of the movie, was that to do a literal translation of Green Lantern 87 would be difficult in this day and age, and I agree with that completely. But I think there's ways you could do it. You could come up with something different without aping Hal and Kyle's origin stories to do it.
Right. It can be done.
Yeah, there's better ways to do it. And
it's called being creative.
Yeah, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but in the last episode, if you go back and re-listen to that episode, I talked about how I would have done it, and it would have been better. But anyway, thank you so much, Corey, for your feedback. I co-sign, agree 100%. This is somebody who didn't read any of the reviews and spoilers until he was able to watch it on his own and get his own take on it. And his take lined up with ours pretty much. So anyway, thanks so much. Power Ring, why don't you go ahead and read the next piece of feedback?
The next message is from Ken. He has a few questions he would like to pose to you both. I will split each question up into its own segment to facilitate the conversation. Playing the first question in 3, 2, 1.
Hi Myron and Phil. Thank you for the nice feedback. I'm glad you're liking my questions. Phil, you mentioned me coming onto the show. I would love to do that. Just let me know. In the meantime, here are some more questions/concepts.
I was thinking over the concept of code names and call signs and I thought, what if the ring censored what lanterns say?
The rings already translate the wearer, why wouldn't it translate or even encode parts of the lantern's dialogue so that others don't hear their secret identities? I get secret identities are a little outdated with the popularity of the MCU and most lanterns don't use them, but considering some of the lanterns still wear masks and want to keep their identities secret, especially Kyle who lost both his girlfriend and mother because the villains knew who he was and wanted him to suffer, I imagine censoring their speech could be a benefit. So, my concept is that the ring automatically replaces the wearers whenever it is said in public with a code name like Highball, or it translates the name into an ancient/lost alien language, like Jonathan to Johannes. The latter could be a little alarming for people on Earth, but considering they have seen aliens, zombies and etc., it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. What do you think of this idea to protect the secret identities of Earth's Green Lanterns? And are there any other reasons lanterns should wear masks? Tomar used to wear one, so I can imagine an excuse being that it was a part of the uniform.
Hey Ken, thanks so much for reaching out again and giving us some interesting things to think about. We were talking about code names and call signs before, and I didn't see a whole lot of reason for it, but I can understand what would happen if Batman was talking to Hal and Kyle. Both of them have secret identities. How would he refer to them? Green Lantern A and Green Lantern B? So I kind of get, having some way of making them unique. I mean, with Guy and John, you don't have to worry about it because they don't have secret identities, but Joe Mullane, Simon Baz, Jessica Cruz, Hal, and Kyle all have secret identities. So I can understand it to a point. I guess I would look one of them in the eyes and call him Green Lantern, and then look the other one in the eyes and call him Green Lantern, and then they know who I'm talking to. But that maybe I'm being oversimplified.
It's pretty safe across the board. You're a Green Lantern. You're a Green Lantern. We're all in the same group. Good.
I'm talking to the group. I'm not talking one-on-one or whatever. I don't know. But I do kind of like the idea of Highball and things like that. But I don't know as if it would carry. There's so little regard for continuity. I don't think it matters to today's writers and editors, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd agree. I got to add, Ken, as far as like when you call somebody, or when they're communicating with each other, I'd imagine that, I don't know. First off, I think the secret identity trope is wearing itself out these days. I think it's on its way out. I think we're at the age where you have the namesake for the character Clark Kent and Superman, and they've been synonymous with each other, and now that's what they're going to be known synonymously for moving forward. It's the same thing with Hal Jordan, Green Lantern. I mean, it's just, to me, I think the secret identity thing has kind of run its course, because we all know at this point it's so absurd to be believable that nobody would recognize who these characters are. As far as with their communication with the rings, I would imagine that a lot of these lanterns, when the ring comes through, how do you know? So all we know is we visualize what we see on the panels of the pages. So maybe it's alien language coming through, and there's some kind of special decoder on the Green Lantern ring where it doesn't reveal anybody's name. It says and another thing, an alien Green Lantern could be calling, and the ring, we know, translates that. So, but maybe it doesn't translate it for the people listening within earshot of the ring wearer. Maybe it just translates it for the person that's right there. Yeah. I mean, that's my best to come up with on that,
Well, in the secret identity thing, you're right, it is a bit of a trope. But, you and I were just talking about identity crisis, and that drove home why you needed secret identities. Because it wasn't so much about you protecting your identity, but you protecting your family's identity.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
You know, is your family, you know.
And I don't know why, you know, it's an interesting trope in comic books to have secret identities. But I can understand if you, you know, let's because we're talking Green Lantern. Green Lanterns weren't able to use power rings to provide for themselves. So if you're a Green Lantern, you got to have a way to get food and provide for your way of living. And to get a job as a superhero, most places wouldn't want to hire you. So, you know, I can kind of see it. And I can see it if you have a family. You know, if you're on a planet where you've got villains, I mean, can you imagine how hard it would be for some of these characters if they're, you know, think of the Flash. Think of poor Iris West, how hard it would be for her to stay alive with all of those Flash villains out there that would know who the Flash is. So I get it, but
it's a fair point. You're right. But, you know, whatever. I guess it's writer's choice.
All right, Power Ring, why don't you give us the next part of Ken's message?
With Dark Crisis, it's nice to see the Lanterns again, especially Arisia and Isamot Cole alive, though I wouldn't have minded seeing BDG and Yolandi as GLs again to really stick it to Thorne, but it begs the question, why did it take so long to rescue Kyle? You were able to give a ring to Guy and Jess, but you couldn't have taken the time to rescue Kyle first before visiting Earth again, or just sent out a ring/power battery for Kyle to use? You're facing Necron. You don't want the former White Lantern who also held almost all but one of the entities? John had godlike power before dying. He couldn't have used it to bring everybody back together or at least repower their rings? The rings couldn't have been destroyed since there was that bucket of rings in the last issue of Thorne's Garbage. It's just bad writing/plotting. Also, I saw in concept art for the second volume of Thorne's book that Simon was considered a Guardian, which is just ridiculous. Seriously, what in you-know-whose name was Thorne in the editor's thinking?
Alright, Ken, Dark Crisis. Well, first off, let's troll on Thorne just a little bit, because, you know, I mean, according to the writer, dead is dead when it comes to the Green Lantern world, but, I mean, clearly that's not the case with Arisia and Isamot Cole being alive. So, again, you know, I guess he was full of it. I don't know. I mean, I don't know why these writers say the things they do, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of times, I don't know, there's some writers I like and there's some I don't, and there's some I just don't listen to anyway, so it doesn't really matter. We all have our certain ones that we follow, but I mean, I don't know. When it comes to Green Lantern, I don't want to rip on Thorne too much. I don't know the guy. I just know that he's thrown some shade and criticism at the Green Lantern verse, and it's like, you know, you don't need to do that. You know, if you want to come at Green Lantern the way you want to come at it, that's fine. You don't need to throw shade in the face of what you're coming into to write this book. That was my first problem going into this book. Did it taint my vision of Green Lantern and his writing for the 12 issues? Absolutely not, because 12 issues later, it was still crap writing, and it still is to me. But look what you're coming off of. I mean, I'm sorry, you can't put Thorne in the same sentence as Morrison. It just won't work. Never in any lifetime or multiverse ever.
Yeah.
But back to the book, Dark Crisis. I mean, you know, that's just where I'm at.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Were the things that we saw, like Isamot Cole and Arisia and Badge and Yolandi as Green Lanterns again, were those sticking it to Thorne? I don't know. You know, I hesitate to give DC that much credit because I don't think that they necessarily are paying attention. I mean, did you see the big controversy that happened over the weekend with the Hispanic Heritage Month cover with Kyle Rayner on it?
Oh God, no, I didn't hear about this. But
So let me just encapsulate in a nutshell. And all of this is really, it has nothing to do with Ken's question, but it ties back to DC not really paying attention. A Hispanic artist did a cover with Kyle Rayner, and it was paying tribute to a famous Mexican street artist. And DC, for whatever reason, said they could not use the cover for legal reasons. And so they redid the cover and show now the cover has Kyle Rayner with a flag behind him that says Viva Mexico, and he's holding a bag overflowing with tamales.
Oh, that's racist.
Awful spicy take, you know. And I don't know, you know, not to get into the subject matter too much, but I don't know why the legal matters mattered in any way, shape, or form, because DC has done homages up the yin-yang for covers all across their history. So I don't see what it was there unless somebody raised an issue to DC and said you can't use it. But I find that a little hard to believe. But to me, it just goes back to the point of DC editorial does not know what they're doing. So whether this is a backhanded slap to Thorne, is it intentionally undoing some elements of Thorne's story, or is it just the artist needed some Green Lantern characters and pulled some source material out and drew them? Because none of those characters had anything really to do in the entire issue. They're just background characters. And I get his point. Why did it take so long to get to Kyle? Because we know that time passes differently in the Dark Sector, so we don't know how long that Thorne story takes place, and we don't really know how long after Thorne's story does this take place. There's not really a good sense of time. But yeah, you would think that Guy and Hal and John would not be sitting by letting Kyle just float out there somewhere where he was captive of somebody. They'd be going after him. He would have been a high priority acquisition. Again, as Ken points out, you've got the guy who mastered the white power ring. You want him on your side, and if he's missing, you're going to go find him.
You'd think he'd be treated more of as a high target character. I mean, much like Kilowog. Kilowog's the same way.
Yeah.
I mean, he trains all the lanterns.
He's a much higher priority. You'd be trying to get him back. But anyway, now Ken has some other questions he's asking. I'm going to save them for the next episode because we're starting to run a little long. But he's got 3 more questions to pose to us that I'm going to save for our next episode. So let's wrap it up for now. Power Ring, why don't you tell everybody how they can be a part of the show, and then we'll come back and we'll wrap things up.
You can become a part of the show by leaving a message up to 1 minute long on our voicemail line. Call us at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can also email us at podcast@blockofoa.com. We'd love to hear from you.
All right, Myron, we're into the Dark Crisis now. I feel the walls closing in on me. The lights are going down. Our heroes are gone. And guess what I'm going to watch? Super Pets.
Yeah, it's been good to get together again. I apologize for us taking so long to get back together again and record. I apologize to you, Phil, and to our listeners, but sometimes things happen and get out of our control, and
life happens.
Exactly. Life is what happens when you're busy making plans.
Yeah, and I wish we had a multiverse concept, because I'd really like to have some more of me to help out around the house.
Wouldn't that be nice? But we
fun to work. I could sit here and we could just podcast all day.
Right. We'd have oodles of content galore. I know. I was looking around my lantern cave, and I've got a lot of stuff piling up. I've got a whole bunch of stuff I've gotten in that I have had every good intention of doing YouTube videos for, and I just have not gotten the energy. And now my office area here is such a mess. I need to clean things up just so I can do anything. But
man, you took that whole vacation. If you wouldn't have fallen off that ladder and burned your hand, you'd have been all right.
Yeah, I probably would have. It was on my list of things to do, but my wife's list of things to do took priority over my list of things to do. So
I'm really glad I don't have the wife that has the list of things to do. She's pretty good about leaving me to my own devices.
I should have just not said I was taking a vacation and got up every morning and went like I was going to work. She wouldn't have known, But my integrity got in the way. Oh well. So if we don't have anything to talk about for the next episode, maybe I will go and put a poll out there on Facebook and in our Facebook group and see what people might like for us to talk about. Maybe we'll go back and revisit the John's run again, or maybe people will have something they want us to talk about in particular. So I'll throw that up there.
And don't forget, Jeff Johns' JSA is coming out soon too.
Yeah, I am excited about that.
I'll be picking that up.
His JSA run got me back into comics when I left it. I left comics there for a while, and his run is what pulled me back in again. So I'm excited to see.
He needs to be he needs to be writing again. That's where his strength is. I mean, his Aquaman reboot. I mean, Flash Rebirth. Come on, the list goes on and on with this guy, and I mean that's where his strength always is. I mean, this will be no different. Doomsday Clock wasn't much to be desired, but whatever.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, did he? Yeah, he wrote that.
Yep, he wrote that one. I did like Geiger. that he did.
Yeah, Geiger was cool. I did that one. So,
but all right, my friends. Well, until next time, treat each other well, keep that power ring charged, and make every day your brightest day. See you soon. The Podcast of Oa is the official podcast of the blog of Oa and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of Oa and the Podcast of Oa on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of Oa and the Podcast of Oa are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.